Hey, good afternoon to you. 306 now News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up 3:30, our buddy Chris Bedford will be here from the Common Sense Society magazine. We'll take a look at yesterday's election results, what they say about the country, what they mean for the country, and what comes next. Henry Eichelberg will be with us at 4 o'clock. He's the treasurer-elect in Loudoun County, a bright spot in yesterday's results. We'll get his reaction. How did that happen? Also, we'll talk a little bit about the unseating of one Buddha Biberai. Thank goodness the devil's been tossed from that job. And Mike Chapman, the sheriff, getting reelected. That's great news. Tommy Tuberville will be with us at 4:30. That's right. The United States Senator from Alabama is going to join us and talk about his latest plans as they relate to the United States military, the Biden administration, and the misuse of American tax dollars. And Senator Ted Cruz is also here at 5:30 today. We'll talk to him about everything going on in the world, and we'll talk to you at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Come on in. We'd appreciate your input today, especially your reaction to the election yesterday. Yeah, it was a bummer. It was a total, unmitigated bummer. Well, the slight mitigation, I guess. As I said, Buddha Biberai was thrown out. That was cause for celebration. But by and large, an even night is a loss. An even night is a loss. And it was a loss. It was a loss yesterday. This is an environment where Republicans should be doing gangbusters, just absolutely cleaning up, mopping the floor with Democrats who have so driven so many of our communities and certainly our country into a ditch. I mean, you couldn't ask for a worse group of characters to create a better set of circumstances for the opposition party to thrive. But there's a lesson built into this. There's a lot of lessons built into this. And one of them is you can't just draft on the other guys being crap. That's not a way to win an election at all. You have to have a positive vision for how you're actually going to govern and make it appealing and get people to show up to the polls to vote for you. You can't have an entire campaign that's predicated merely on, well, just show up to vote early instead of going on election day. It can't be the only message of your campaign. And unfortunately, throughout much of the Virginia election, that appeared to be the only message. Either that and peppered in with some help Glenn Youngkin finish off his agenda. But we watched yesterday as these results came in, and it was loss after loss for Republicans. Now, let's do good news, bad news. I want to start with good news, if I can. Although, of course, I've already started with bad news. But let's lean into some good news for a moment. Here is some good news for you. So Buddha Biberai tossed. That's great. But additionally, something that's worth noting, when Virginia redid its maps in 2021, they were not favorable to Republicans. When those maps were redrawn, and I'm talking about all of the districts. It's the state Senate districts, the House of Delegate districts, all of the congressional districts across the state. When they were redrawn, they were not redrawn in a way that was going to favor Republicans. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Democrats were favored to win both the House of Delegates and the state Senate. And not only were they favored by a wider margin than last night's numbers gave us. In fact, the final map that was put forward by the two special masters given to the state Supreme Court and signed off in December of 2021 meant that there was a 53-47 Democratic edge in the House of Delegates. Well, as of this hour, it looks like we're headed to a 51-49 Democrat edge. It's smaller by 2 seats in either direction. That's in the Republicans' favor. Republicans don't have control of the House anymore going into the new year, but they are overperforming the way the maps are drawn, and that's a good sign, but not a great one, considering they don't have the House of Delegates. The Senate, meanwhile, was drawn in such a way that Democrats should hold 23 seats to 17 Republican seats. 23 to 17. As of last night, it is now 21 to 19. In fact, Republicans picked up a seat in the state Senate. They didn't pick up control, but they picked up a seat. So that's all well and good. That's perfectly fine. But now you don't have the House of Delegates. All we have at the moment, the only last line of defense is the governor, Governor Glenn Youngkin, to be able to stop the excesses of a now entirely Democrat-controlled state legislature. And that's, again, a bummer. Let's look around the country now. There's a lot of races that went down yesterday. Virginia, of course, Democrats seize the Virginia legislature. Soros prosecutors ousted in a number of places across the country. That includes not just Loudoun County, where Buddha Biberi was tossed out. We also have Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. That's Pittsburgh. A guy called Matt Dugan. He's also a Soros prosecutor, thrown out. Broome County, New York. That's the Binghamton area. Matt Ryan, a Soros-funded prosecutor, also thrown out. So some signs that people have had enough of crime and the failure to prosecute it. As far as that Soros-funded prosecutor in Fairfax County, Virginia, remember him, Steve Descano? The one, he's a nightmare. There was a write-in campaign to throw him out. The GOP supported a Democrat who had run against Steve Descano in the primary by the name of Ed Nuttall. Ed Nuttall would finish the night with 23% of the vote. 23% of the vote with just a write-in candidacy. That's encouraging, but Steve Descano still holds the job. Over in Kentucky, it's a red state, isn't it? Well, the governor there continues to be Andy Beshear. Andy Beshear prevails over Daniel Cameron, winning in that race. The rest of the ticket went pretty red. Republicans elected all up and down the board, but not when it came to governor. Not when it came to governor. They ran a vicious campaign against Daniel Cameron. They really did. They were alleging that he was seeking to let women die rather than let them have their reproductive health care. These are the types of campaigns they ran against him, and they spent a lot of money to stop him. They really wanted to hurt this guy, Cameron. Andy Beshear wins another term. In Mississippi, Republicans do hold on. Tate Reeves wins the re-election there in Mississippi. In that case, Republicans outspent Democrats. That's one of the races. Money plays a huge role here, I should say. You did actually have Republicans win, and they spent the most money in that race. Tate Reeves was not a sure thing. He ends up winning pretty handily. In Ohio, big race. The media loves this race. Specifically, not a race per se, but actually a modification to their constitution. There were two issues, but I'll start with issue one. This is the one everybody's talking about. Issue one, Ohio made abortion a constitutional right. In other words, the right to death is now a constitutional right in Ohio. And it went up. It happened by a wide margin. 57% of the electorate in favor of a right to death to be built into the Ohio Constitution. But getting no attention today, or at least very little attention, is issue number two. Do you know what issue number two was in Ohio? It was also another ballot referendum. It was right there on the ballot. It was weed legalization. Pot. They included the legalization of marijuana and sale. You can now sell marijuana in the state of Ohio with issue two. Guess what the numbers were on that? 57% of the electorate. The same breakdown voted for weed as voted for abortion. Now, is there a lesson in there? Does that tell you anything about the nature of the voters who actually showed up in Ohio to vote for all of this? Well, it should. One lesson is Democrats got their pothead base to show up and vote for a weed referendum, and they got the spillover benefit of a bunch of votes for Democrat causes all up and down the ballot to include abortion in Ohio. And this is not the first time they've done this. Democrats love putting marijuana referendums on ballots in order to stimulate voter turnout. There's lessons in here for Republicans, I should say. Republicans should pay close attention to this, especially when it comes to using ballot referendums as a way to induce more turnout from your base. Democrats do this. It's a time-tested thing. They do it over and over and over again. They did it in 2012 in Colorado, quite famously, remember? They turned out a ton of people to support the legalization of marijuana, and it just so happened to be a presidential election, and it just so happened that Barack Obama did not get the majority of the vote, but by a very slim margin in Colorado back in 2012. He was surely helped by the fact that weed was on the ballot when he ran in that race. And so Democrats have established a time-tested strategy here. Put weed on the ballot, we'll get turnout, and then we can get the other stuff we want voted for. Weed has the secondary benefit of dulling the electorate so that they don't think too clearly about the governance that they have. So there is that. In Pennsylvania, ahead of a series of 2024 election cases, why wouldn't there be? Pennsylvania has Democrats retain a big majority on the state Supreme Court. Quite unfortunately, that meddlesome Pennsylvania state Supreme Court, it retains its Democrat majority. Some concerns in Pennsylvania. In one county in Pennsylvania, Northampton County, they allegedly had voting machines that were flipping votes yesterday, according to the Associated Press, those election deniers at the Associated Press. They say a coding error in voting machines in Northampton County, Pennsylvania, led to votes getting flipped on a ballot question regarding the retention of 2 state judges. The error reportedly involved the retention votes for Pennsylvania Superior Court judges Jack Piniella and Victor Stabile. Votes marked yes to retain one judge and no for the other were being switched on the printouts from touchscreen voting machines, the AP reported, citing County Executive Lamont McClure. The glitch, which affected over 300 machines, that's a lot of machines, was reportedly noticed by voters because of the discrepancies on the printed records. The Pennsylvania Department of State confirmed the issue was confined to Northampton County and did not impact any other races, per the AP. Oh, okay, so, whew. All right, glad to hear that's fine. No problems there. Why is a voting machine flipping votes? How does that even happen? Does anyone do a test of these things ahead of time? New Jersey, Democrats padded their numbers in the state houses there. They expanded their control of the New Jersey legislature. In Texas, we had a vote for the Houston mayoral race that went down yesterday. Remember, Sheila Jackson Lee is the lawmaker from the very angry, vicious, staff-hating lawmaker from the state of Texas. She is now running for mayor of Houston. Overnight, her and her opponent, Texas State Senator John Whitmer, are locked in a dead heat right now, neither having cleared a 50% threshold to win. So prayers up for Sheila Jackson Lee's staff today. I'm hoping they can survive her impatience over not being declared the victor. And then here's one of the critical elements here I want to share with you: spending. There's a lot of pieces here for Republicans to pick up on. But one is spending. Democrats outspent Republicans practically 2-1 across the country on all of these races. In an environment where Joe Biden is absolutely loathed by the American electorate, if I'm looking at Kentucky governor, just the Kentucky governor's race, Democrats spent about $50 million. Republicans, 29. 29 in that race. Andy Beshear wins it. Virginia legislature, what did Democrats spend? $35.2 million. Republicans, $27.6, nearly $10 million less than Democrats did. In an environment where Republicans should have won. Ohio issue 1, that's the abortion issue. Democrats spent $24.5 million. Republicans only spent $16 million on their position in that race. Mississippi governor, this is the win for Republicans. Remember I told you about the money? Democrats spent $8.7 million trying to unseat Tate Reeves. Republicans spent $10 million and they kept him. Oh, money matters. It does matter here. Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which Democrats, again, retained control here. Democrats spent $10 million. Republicans, $6.5. New Jersey legislature, where Democrats expanded their control of both houses. They spent $8.7 million. The Republicans, $2 million. And that Houston mayoral race, the one where it's neck and neck right now, at the moment, Democrats spent $6.2 million trying to get one of the world's most awful women elected. $6.2 million. Republicans, 1.6. 1.6 in that race. Money clearly matters here. Money clearly matters. The other piece is that the left knows no bottom. In Ohio, they were straight up saying that Republicans want to kill women. In Kentucky, they were saying that Daniel Cameron wants to kill women. There is no bottom for them. They will say the most awful possible thing they can to scare voters into submission. They really do. And finally, and then we'll get to your calls here, one other piece I want to make sure to emphasize is not only what was the message for Republicans. You can't just run against the other guys. You have to have a positive vision. But where's the leadership? Leadership, top to bottom. Whether it's at the state level, the various Republican Party leaders who should be the guiding hand, who are actually winning elections, putting points on the scoreboard. And if you don't, no matter what your strategy is, you probably should be replaced, right? Put somebody else in, get another coach who can lead the team to victory. What about at the national level? Should Ronna McDaniel continue to run the Republican National Committee? How many elections in a row are they going to lose at the national level? It's just over and over and over and over again. Ronna is a perfectly nice woman. A perfectly nice woman. But being a nice person is not the qualification for being the head of the RNC. Who should have that job? The answer to that, fundamentally, is someone who wins elections and acts with aggression and has a unified message and doesn't run away from issues that make them scared. Instead, comes up with clear answers on them, especially on issues like abortion. All right, a lot more ahead. Any reasonable person who loves their country is going to think clearly about this and try and come up with some good answers how we go forward. 322. All right, let's take Lee calling in from Leesburg, line 1. Lee, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. How you doing?
Good, Lee. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, what's disappointing to me, yesterday, 46.83% of the vote showed up in Loudoun County. So if I just cut that in half, I'm down to 23.4% of the vote.
Uh-huh.
You're basically saying 24.3% of the vote is going to carry Loudoun County to the finish line. The problem here is that there is this general apathy, I find, among Republican voters. And, you know, I've donated thousands of dollars to Republican candidates. I not only do that, I work on the campaigns. I go out and even canvass, do all this legwork. And still, with all of that done, this is what you end up with. And this, to me, is like, this is extremely frustrating. It's like, what are we doing, you know?
You feel like you're spinning your wheels, right, Lee?
Spinning your wheels. Yeah, I'm freaking spinning wheels. And you know, I can't drag people out of their house to go vote.
Yeah.
You know?
I've got to... we got to run here, but I got to say, this is a great topic. I want to talk about this more. I think our audience is unusual in that we have a lot of people who are very active, involved in their communities, but that's not true everywhere. There are plenty of Republicans who still sit it out, who don't think much of this, who externalize all of this, or like, oh, well, they're not doing anything for me. Okay, fine, but what the hell have you done? Our founding fathers were willing to give up their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to make this country work. Rick Santorum's talked about this. It takes a little bit of sacrifice on everybody's part. You've got to grab an oar and save the country. Like I said, this audience is pretty good about that. I can't say that about everybody. All right, stand by. Chris Bedford's going to break it down for us next. Hey, good afternoon. It is 3:35 here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up today on the program, Henry Eichelberg will be with us at 4 o'clock. A bright spot in the elections yesterday. He's the treasurer-elect in Loudoun County. We'll talk about the other big victories there, to include Bob Anderson beating Buddha Biberai. We'll just call her Booba. I should have done that a long time ago in Loudoun County. And then Mike Chapman also winning as sheriff. That's great. Henry will talk about all of that. Tommy Tuberville will be with us at 4:30, United States Senator. And then another United States Senator joins us at 5:30. That's Ted Cruz. You can talk to us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Democrats are convinced they have a winning message. If they just run on baby death, they can win every election going forward. Abortion is the big winner for them, even with everybody being absolutely down on the current president of the United States, who is a Democrat. For more on what we saw yesterday and what it actually means for our country, I want to bring in Chris Bedford now. He's an executive editor of Common Sense Society magazine and joins us on the phone. Hello, Chris.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. Yesterday was a lousy day in terms of elections and what comes next for America. But what do you make of it if you picked up any general themes?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, it was lousy. Virginia it was not unexpected. Virginia was not particularly unexpected. Republicans had a hard hill to climb in order to win. Glenn Youngkin poured a lot of money and a lot of effort into Virginia. They were still outspent by Democrats, but they had an uphill fight. In order to actually get both the or to retain the Virginia House and to win the Virginia Senate, they would need to take 3 districts that Biden won by double-digit points. The Republicans were able to win every single district that Biden won by single-digit points and hold the other Republican areas,
That's
but
true.
not enough to get them over. And at the end of the day, they're just outside of a trifecta of holding power over all of these, over the House, the Senate, and the governorship,
Yes.
which would allow Glenn Youngkin to really take off. The hardest hit there is some of his agenda, and especially his early presidential aspirations. Now, Ohio really freaked me out. I understand it. The amendment that Ohio passed is kind of coded in a lot of happy-dappy civil rights language, just about rights and health and choice. But the reality of the matter is the Ohio amendment allows would allow abortion up till basically birth, and it would remove parents from the situation when it involves minors. And it would allow for the same thing for sex change surgeries or treatments for minors included. And that's a really dangerous thing to enshrine in your Constitution. I don't know how many people realize just what they were voting for on that.
It's demented. And so when you look at it, you think, well, there's some generous options, which include people were misled. People wrongly think that the pro-life position is the extremist one or whatever. I mean, you can try and dress it up that way. You could also look at it and go, man, something's wrong with their spirit, that they're on board with this much human sacrifice, and they want to codify it literally into the Constitution of the state. I think there's some big questions about what's happening in our country right now.
I think it's extremely hard to be generous on this. I agree. It's sad to realize that your neighbors and people you disagree with politically, and maybe some friends and family members are at a point right now because of political divisions in this country that they're willing to actually vote for something that's quite that extreme.
Yeah.
And the Democrats weren't dumb, or the liberals weren't dumb in Ohio. George Soros's crew really pioneered a tactic of putting popular ballot measures on the ballot during important elections. They did it with weed legalization in Colorado. Remember, Colorado used to be red, and then it was purple, and now it's blue. Part of it was that operation. And you see this, and you were talking to me about this earlier, Vince. You see this in Ohio, where they had weed legalization on the ballot, and the numbers really line up pretty incredibly between those who voted for weed legalization and those who voted for this death bill.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, both 57%, weed and abortion, got exactly the same vote. A little bit of difference in the vote total. One of the other things, if I can get kind of philosophical, theological with you, as we often do when Chris Bedford joins, one of the things about the country right now, it does seem like a lot of Americans, as bad as things are, like we look around and they say their lives are not as good as they were. You're looking at bank accounts are slipping. They don't like the crime around them. But haven't you found that it's kind of almost become an American pastime to avoid conflict entirely? It's like we specialize in conflict avoidance, don't we? Like, it's like if things are going bad around us, you always have some other distraction to turn to, whether it's on your phone or your television or you smoke it or whatever. It's like, we can escape into this. And we've done so much escaping that we've kind of abandoned our responsibilities to our communities, haven't we? I mean, this is how you end up with a society that prizes TikTok over toddlers.
Yeah, we've had a lot of bonds breaking down, not just in our communities, but in our homes. I mean, how many couples wake up and fall asleep on their cell phones in bed as opposed to talking to each other about their day?
Yes.
Or how many families are broken up by a television as opposed to family dinner? How many people spend Sundays throwing on the game and catching up on some chores as opposed to beginning it with church? I mean, how many people post on Facebook and post on Twitter and consider that their civic engagement for the month? They don't go to the board meetings. And there is something also to a lot of the bureaucratic left has been very successful at making a lot of these community meetings extremely boring events where a lot of actually important things are kind of hidden behind a lot of slow droning bureaucracy.
Yeah.
You got a kids. It's difficult to get out there and to spend a couple hours listening to people prattle on, but that's where important decisions are made. But yeah, when you can go back, when your state can legalize infanticide almost, and you can go back and just hop on TikTok. It's kind of bread and circuses for a lot of people.
Yes, indeed. So, Chris Bedford, one of the other pieces is the way that Democrats and Republican voters think about the act of voting. Those are radically different things. So, among the left, their leadership class, the people who run the Democrat Party, have very much propagandized the idea that you fetishize the act of voting above everything else. I was talking to a friend about this morning as we all do this post-election analysis. That they fetishize voting without any consideration of what the long-term effect is going to be. That it's all about, like, you've got to vote, you've got to be a participant, you got to do this, it's for your country, and blah, blah, blah. And if somebody votes against you, you should lock them up in Gitmo. That's what the dude said in Arlington yesterday. Remember that guy screaming at the Arlington County Republican guy who's like, you should be locked in Gitmo for having a different position than you? What? But the Democrats have fetishized just the act of voting, again, without consideration for the effect. Meanwhile, Republican voters are all over the place right now. Some are very active in voting and getting out the vote, trying to get more and more of their friends and their family to vote. Others think that this is all a rigged system, that there's no reason to vote whatsoever. The game is rigged. I'm sitting this out. If I participate, the whole thing's going to be a lie anyway. It doesn't matter. This is like obviously a real sentiment that really exists out there. And as a result, I think that combination of those attitudes is leading to some of these really unfortunate outcomes in these elections. Am I wrong?
I don't think that's wrong. I think it's a really interesting take. I mean, the left has really fetishized and taken even the word democracy and used it in its own way. I mean, the protests is, if you go down to these protests, and all the smiling and the yelling and the chanting and the bars are filled afterwards, it's a concert atmosphere. The I voted stickers that they hand out are like a symbol. I mean, I remember thinking it was kind of funny as I walked around Washington, D.C. in 2016 with a little I voted sticker on. People were coming up to me and saying, thank you, like I'd served. And I thought, imagine if these people know I just voted for for the orange guy.
Yes.
They definitely wouldn't be thanking me.
Thank
How
you.
dare I?
Thank you for voting for the orange guy.
I just wanted to be on the rolls. I did think that Hillary was probably going to pull that off, and I just wanted to be on the list of her enemy list. She came into office, so I was voting. It's
almost like a church garment. It's like a religious garment, isn't it? It's like it's
civic religion.
Yeah, it's a sign of your devotion.
I mean, you spend Sunday down at the protest. I go to my parents' hometown up in Cape Cod, and every Sunday there's a group of people out there with signs. There still was during the Trump years saying Trump is killing people, Trump is evil. This is their Sunday worship service, and Republicans really don't have that. Now, Youngkin did a lot of work to try and change the early voting culture, but he needed to do more. More needs to be done, and it takes time to really change that culture. And pastors need to get off their butts. In Ohio, which has a very high church attendance rate for modern America, pastors were noticeably quiet on the issue, not talking from the pulpit.
What is this about? Why are they doing that? I mean, it seems to me that the general sentiment is, this is kind of how they dodge all of these important questions, especially as it relates to life. They'll say things like, well, their focus is on getting people to heaven. They have to stay out of the politics and all of this. You're letting a lot of souls die. I mean, this is why can't you speak up for the obvious? Why so much cowardice?
Yeah, you render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's, but the unborn children belong to God, and you don't give those up to Caesar. You go out there and you make us think about it.
Yeah.
You talk about it. And I was actually really proud of Bishop Burbridge of Arlington, and the Bishop of Richmond came out with a statement that said, I know there's a lot of issues that people vote on, but you need to understand that life is paramount. It is more important than your other issues, and there's a grave evil, and you must get out there and vote. And that was a great statement, but I didn't hear a lot of it in church on Sundays. I didn't hear it in the pulpit. I didn't hear people saying you must go out. And that culture of don't talk about elections really does exist in white Protestant churches and white and Catholic churches.
Yes.
But you don't really see it. There's a lot more comfort talking about politics, probably born out of the civil rights movement before, in black churches. And a lot of those pastors are pretty open, and whether it's President Barack Obama in the past or this idea or that idea of telling their parishioners to vote. And I think that's an important weapon in the Democrats' arsenal.
Yeah, and I think they have every right to. But one of the things that the black churches do is that they welcome candidates into their churches. They stand at the pulpit. They make speeches. It's like literally out in the open. It's not it's not hidden at all. Everyone's like, oh yeah, that's totally normal. Nobody raises a stink about that. Why can't this happen in all the churches? Why can't they raise the issues of importance to their communities?
It's sort of what they call that shy Tory symptom, or no one really wants to talk about it if they think it's conservative, or of course it's okay to have liberal politics in church because that funny heresy that Jesus was a hippie. Of course that's okay.
Yeah. You can fly your pride flag and your Black Lives Matter flag. Nobody's going to bat an eye. It's all totally fun.
Yeah, but you certainly can't talk about life. I've noticed that there's more and more coming into, at least in the Catholic churches in Northern Virginia, more preachers want to talk about it. But it needs to continue. It needs to be, by the time you've got states like Ohio codifying this regime of death into their constitution, if that's not a wake-up call, I don't know what is for religious leaders and for people around it. When you've got people so turned off by the Republicans' abortion message in Virginia, it was polling very poorly amongst a lot of voters. You need to get out there and speak that message differently.
So,
I don't know. It's a hard thing to get to.
It's amazing. So I guess a couple of quick thoughts on abortion, because I do think that there are ways out of this. In terms of, I hear a lot of people say, well, Republicans should just have, come up with a better message or whatever. But one of the obvious things is, the candidates, as far as I can tell, they hide from the issue. They don't come up with a better message. They hide. They pretend like it's not happening. They stick their head in the sand and they hope it drives past them. And it's not going to drive past you. It's going to run into you. So what are you going to do when it gets there? And the answer is, you should point out that the true radicals in this position are the ones who want to make America more extreme than every other country on the planet, save for China and North Korea. Truly, we are in the most extreme human rights violations on the planet right now with what we do to children in this country. That's just true.
They always say they want to be more like Europe, but I think in France and Germany and Italy and Spain.
Yes. Europe is more protective of their babies. Europe is more protective of their babies than America is. That's just true.
They are.
That's just true. And then the other piece is that I honestly think that a lot of Democrat voters don't actually know the virtue that's behind the broad pro-life position. They don't know it. In fact, one of the reasons I think this, Chris, is because I'll see, sometimes on social media, I'll see some lefty say, oh, you're going to force a woman to have a baby? Well, why don't you force a father to pay child support? They'll say this as if it's like a great argument. And what you'll see is a conservative, a conservative will come along and say, your terms are acceptable. And everybody laughs about it. Yeah, ha, ha, ha. That's exactly what conservatives believe. But there's some truth that's built into that little jab, which is, the left doesn't know this, Chris. They don't actually realize that the conservative position is that if you're a father, you better not be a deadbeat one. And that if you're a mother, you have a precious gift from God.
You're right. And I think there's been a failure to really tell those stories properly and to tell them with the emotional stories correctly. If you looked at some of the ads that were airing in Kentucky or some of the ads that were airing in Virginia from Democrats, you have maybe someone who was raped by an older family member looking directly into the camera and speaking about that awful experience and then pointing the finger at Republicans. You look at Republican ads and you've got some campaign actor dressed up like a goofy bandit sneaking into someone's house and saying, I'm allowed to steal here because the Democrats will get elected. And that's just doesn't have the emotional reaction. If you're trying to do anti-crime advertisement in Northern Virginia, why don't you have the families and relatives of the victims of MS-13, of the young woman shot and executed in the park, of the gang rape victims who have been going on, have them talk to the camera. If you want to talk about abortion, have abortion survivors and those people who've been supported and those people who've worked in clinics talking directly to the camera and telling people about the reality of it.
Yes.
But there was just such a maybe it's because Virginia suffers from being so close to D.C. and so full of consultants that the GOP ads just didn't seem to land. And they're not telling the really visceral human story that the pro-life position is working to defend.
You're totally right. If you want to grab voters, you have to have a gripping message. And boy, there are a lot of gripping messages out there. Just put a camera in front of them. Chris Bedford, always appreciate our conversations. Thank you, sir. Always good to talk to you. All right, let's go to line 3. That's where Mike in Washington, D.C. is. Mike, go ahead, sir.
Thank you for taking my phone call. last night that VA race, man, it was a disaster, though, man. And boy, I feel sorry for a lot of those females that have to go to those schools since they got the lunatics in there right now. It's still gonna be forcing them to go in the bathroom with boys.
Yeah.
So that's really. And then what was the name of that dude in the dress that won her race?
Dan Rome.
You notice that that person was talking about everything they was going to do for trans rights. Now, if I was a reporter, I would have asked, okay, well, what are you going to do to protect the rights of the heterosexual? Because they're elected office right now, and they take an oath of office to serve and protect.
Right,
so,
right. Now you're totally right. You know what? That race in particular, everybody knows him as Danica. Apparently, he ran entirely on local issues, and then last night in his acceptance speech, it was all trans the whole time, obviously, because it's always about me and my personal identity in the United States of America of 2023. Speaking of Loudoun County, let's go to our next guest. Will be here in a moment. Henry Eichelberg. He just won the role to become treasurer of Loudoun County. We'll congratulate him and talk to him. How'd you do it?